During our summer tour, we shared that we had plans to create a perennial pollinator garden in the front yard, which previously had been an area where there were large clumps of miscanthus grass, which we were able to remove back in mid-June. Okay, the next project, you'll probably not be able to see it as well, but this tall grass right here, that is going to basically be another planting bed, and we're gonna do a higher pollinating planting bed. I have some plants here. So this is Vernonia right here, this one. So I wanna go with like a more peachy colors and dark red purples, things like that. This is Verbena bonariensis, and that is also going to be one that I'd like to plant. That's not a native plant, but I really do like it. It took some time to get the shape of the bed and the walkways just right.
All right, we're going to work on the yard today. So right here you can see that we mowed two areas really low. Over here where the oak is, and over here. The idea is to start turning this into a planting bed. So as you approach the house, you get this large, like deep space where there's all kinds of trees and plants growing. And then over here, we're going to take the lawn up and we're going to eventually put bulbs underneath and then plant like a low meadow so that you'll have maybe 4 inches or so of grass, and with all kinds of different flowers coming up in the early spring, late winter. Now this is going to stay grass, I believe. And then we're just going to have a little section here that's also going to be garden bed. It's kind of a continuation of this curve that you see coming in here. It just crosses where I'm standing, and then it jumps over to the other side, and then it continues that way. So we started to take up the old pathway. So we're using the stones to define where the new edge is going to be. So you could see that previously the path used to be from here to here. So we've given this garden bed a little bit more space, so this has more room to grow. So it eventually falls over the path. And then we're making it a little bit wider all the way up to there. And then here as well, we're making it wider just to have easier access. And then over here you have also this curve. And it's really tricky to figure out all these curves. You just gotta walk the paths like 100 times. But the idea behind this curve is that when you approach the house from this angle, you want to feel like there's just as much space here to go that way as there is space to go that way into the house. So this is kind of how I'm thinking. And then this is the center of these two pathways. So then as you walk in here, you can go to the right. You have this nice curve here, and then these curves kind of continue into these gardens back there, and then also this curve continues to go this way. So it's this intersection here where you feel like you don't want to take any shortcuts, because the worst thing to have is that if you have a path that you have a curve and you actually want to walk right here. So I want to make sure that we have the paths in a place where people actually want to walk. So this tree is also growing a lot more. That's also the reason why we're pushing this further that way. Anyways, Summer's informing what to do for Cayuga Landscape, and hopefully we'll get started taking up the lawn. We got a turf cutter or sod cutter, however you want to call it. And we're gonna take the grass off and then try to level some of this out, because as you can see, it's a bit bumpy. So
since we were planning on planting quite a number of flower bulbs next to the area and would need to remove the sod and grade the land anyway where those bulbs would go, we reserved some time for Brett and Alex to help with the sod removal in the future perennial and herb beds. I think we need to cut it at some point. It's too heavy.
Look at that sushi roll.
Fresh carpet. After that, we trucked in an initial load of organic compost topsoil mix, and then we spread that out, which was a little challenging considering it was so wet and clumpy due to heavy rains. We liked the shape of the bed, so we got to preparing it for planting.
what is this?
This is biotone. So this is
So wait a second. What is this? So we stripped the grass off.
yes.
So we just cut off the grass.
So
then we put
stripped the turf.
This is compost, right?
This is compost. So what we did is we stripped the turf off. We scarified the land. You know, just kind of zhuzhed
Just
it
like
up.
break it up.
Yeah, broke it up because, you know, this is about 24% clay. It does get a little, clay and compacted, so it was helpful to scarify it. And then we added probably roughly 1 to 2 inches of compost on top of that.
Which is this darker stuff.
Yes, exactly. We're adding a little thin layer of biotone, which is like a starter fertilizer for plants to help them with the transplant process. And then on top of this, we're going to put about 2 to 3 inches of composted bark mulch. And we're going to get a rain, this week. So we want to make sure that this is done. But when it stops raining, I want to actually plant this bed. So I want this like fully prepared for when I'm planting it. That's what I'm doing tonight. And I'll probably go through this whole bag of biotone because this is a very large planting area. I didn't realize how large it was until you start taking it up. Now, typically we were doing like no dig methods where we would put cardboard on the grass. But in this case, we're taking up the grass. We're gonna do something else here with planting new lawn seed and bulbs. And then this one, we decided we'd take it up as well. Hey guys, so we're in one of our new garden beds and you'll hear some sanding in the distance. That's Sonder on the sander. So we're actually sanding the side of the house as well. So he's gonna be working on that. That's gonna be his project. And my project is going to be planting up this garden bed, which is really interesting because we still don't have the deer fence. And I could see that there's some animals that are already trying to dig up the garden here. But hopefully when everything is planted, you won't notice a couple plants pulled up here and there. So I'm looking at this Echinacea pallida that just got dug up here, even though I planted it yesterday. So we'll have to do a better job at fixing them in the soil, even though I don't think that's the big issue. But we ended up getting a ton of plants at a retail outlet here called Baker's Acres that I absolutely love, but they're actually retiring this year. So I wanted to go and get some really interesting plant varieties that we could plant up here. And I'm actually keeping it all in a spreadsheet so I know what plants are planted where and in what bed so we could keep a tab on it. But with this bed, we're gonna go a little taller, probably 2 feet to 5 feet, and it'll feel like a natural meadow feeling and will tie in nicely to the high meadow that we're going to be planting in the 7-acre area. Well, technically more of a 5-acre area because we're going to go with a low meadow with fruit trees and berry bushes as well on about 2 of those acres. And then we'll have another planting bed over here. It's not finished yet, but that will be for more medicinal plants and herbs. So that's gonna be my project for today. There's a lot of other things going on, so I could get sidetracked and I might not be able to finish this, but we'll at least try it. As I got to planting, however, we realized it would be nicer if it were bermed up a bit to give it more shape within the landscape at ground level. So I ended up removing some of the plants I had planted and then came in with over 200 wheelbarrow loads of topsoil compost, some biotone, and a layer of composted bark mulch. Additionally, we started to use some of the found local stone to create a pathway for ease of access and as a way to experience the details of the garden some more. Initially, we had just the stone walkway, but it felt a little out of place, so I began to collect some of the chunkier fossils on the land and then line them up on the edge and then add some pea gravel as if the pathway had been a dry riverbed. Around the edges of the pathway, I stuck with more low-growing plants so as not to enshroud the view of the eclectic mix of stones. I'm going to finish up this perennial front garden that's actually behind me. If you could believe it, this wasn't here 2 weeks ago, but we had a contractor come in for another job that needed him to do, which is removing some of the sod around an oak that's actually out of frame. That is where some of our 70,000 bulbs that we planted in the lawn was going to go. So essentially he was creating a bulb coffin is what I called it. And then we took that sod and we bermed up an area in a garden in the back because it was a low-lying area and we wanted to create another planting bed. And we just had him, since he had the bobcat, we had him remove all the turf and the sod from here, and also in an herb bed off to the right that's out of frame that hasn't been fully planted up. And it wasn't our intention to actually finish this garden this year, but I had some extra plants. I started to get inspired, and as you can imagine, just wanted to start planting things up. And now I'm almost finished with it. I say finished, but gardens are never finished. So actually we created a little walkway that I'll show you in the back, and I'm going to be planting up some elfin thyme. So these are the little thymus that have the tiny, tiny little leaves. It's kind of end of season, and I had to go and try to find a source these because none of the local plant nurseries had them. And I'm going to be using some of Espoma Organic Biotone Starter. So actually this Biotone Starter I spread all throughout this bed, but then I wanted to berm it up even a bit more. So some of the organic compost topsoil that we brought in to cover up the bulbs in the quote-unquote bulb coffin, we had some extra left over, but he came during a time when it was really, really wet. It was like downpouring, and the compost topsoil got really, the first loads like got really, really wet and heavy. So I wheelbarrowed in over 200 wheelbarrowfuls of this really heavy, clumpy compost topsoil. And then I put another layer of composted bark mulch on top, and with some biotone in that. And then I basically am sprinkling a little biotone in every hole for the plants, because I'm filming this in mid-October. It's who knows when the frost is going to happen. I want to give these plants the best chance that they have. They're all perennials behind me, so they should take just fine, and the weather's been pretty cooperative. And then in the, these are going to go between the stepping stones. And then I have this pea gravel in this 50-pound bag. I'm not going to pick it up because I'll probably give myself a hernia. But it looks so beautiful, and it matches some of our native stones around here. And what I did with the pathway is, you could spend an hour in this garden bed and have something to look at. And I think what I've realized about what I love about designing is creating some level of detail within that garden that if you care to look, when you're casting your eyes down, through the walkway, you'll find all sorts of fossils and cool objects. The wood that we found that we brought into the garden bed is just so interesting. We wanted to create like little mason bee homes and sort of pill bugs and sow bugs, and so we just got some really beautiful pieces of wood that had fallen down in the forest and just kind of plopped them strategically in the garden bed, and I think they look so beautiful. And so all these fossils that we found and like objects, even like skulls of little animals, we just kind of dotted throughout, and it just looks so cool. So you could spend a lot of time in the garden and have some surprise and delight. The same way that if you were walking through the forest and you move a branch over and then all of a sudden you see like a cool stone or cool object. So I've had fun collecting stones and fossils around the land and placing them in here. And I've strategically only planted low-lying plants like this thymus and a number of others around the stones so that they don't overtake the stones. I could see them growing on the stones a little bit, but again, just kind of like having your fingers and moving your hands and just finding some of those fossils. I think it's just like a fun little process. So without further ado, I'm going to get started on this garden bed. There's much to finish because after I plant this up, I have other things to plant, and it's really early in the morning. The sun has just risen. So let's get started.